Hello again, and welcome back to Kingdom Tales. I'm excited because we're beginning a new book this evening. This is the Tales of the Restoration. This is the third and final book in the series. I waited until it was evening time outside because this is a nighttime sort of a story. You know, when I was growing up, my parents had a picture in the hallway of our home. And in the picture, there was a father and a mother who were praying over their children while they slept. And you wouldn't think that it would be interesting to have a picture of somebody just saying a prayer for somebody. But behind them, as they were praying, you could see angels who were guarding and protecting their loved ones while they slept. Have you ever thought about prayer that way before? That when we pray for each other, God sends angels to protect and to take care of the people that we care about. Did you ever think about praying for other people that way? Asking God to protect them and take care of them. Is there somebody that you need to say a prayer for right now? Somebody who needs God's help and protection? It's okay to pause the video and go and pray for somebody if you need to do that. When you come back, we'll read our story together. This is Grandma Vigilantes. Wheat, wheat! The whistle sounded softly into the thick darkness of the night. Grandma Sarah woke instantly, the warning signal jolting her from her slumber. Wheat, wheat! Few heard the call, but those whose ears were trained turned in their beds, shook off the covers, and made ready to do battle. The warning meant that dark things were creeping out of the garbage dump to do damage somewhere. Danger had breached the surround that protected Bright City. Wheat, wheat! It was the whistle for the Grandma Vigilantes. Grandma Sarah dressed quickly in the deepest of midnight blue pants, which she yanked up over her wrinkled legs, and then, with one more tug, far above her waist. Over her head she pulled a matching cable knit sweater for warmth. Tucking her white hair beneath a knit stocking cap, she tied the laces of solid black shoes with thick, flat heels. Double knots, no need for tripping while on the streets. She patted her pants pockets. Yes, they were full of strikes. Careful to keep her balance, she strapped around her left knee the most important weapon of all, her ever-ready beeper. Steadying herself with a sturdy walking cane in her right hand, she carefully, cautiously touched her knee to the ground, setting off the beeper. She bowed her head closely to listen. Zzz, zzz. Ah, good. The battery was still strong. The signal was low, but clear. She was ready to take her place on night patrol. Grandpa Daniel still lay in bed, snoring and deep in sleep. Grandma Sarah pulled the covers over his chin and whispered a blessing over his dreams. To the king. And then she tiptoed from the bedroom, from the house to where her patrol partner should be waiting on the street outside. With king's ways, she would be gone and back before dawn's break, back before her husband even woke and had a chance to worry. On the front porch, Grandma Sarah touched her left knee to the ground and tapped out a secret code. 2 short buzzes and 1 long. Zzz, zzz, zzz. That meant, Grandma Vigilante reporting for patrol. Are you there? One could never be too careful in the streets at night. The dark, all shadows looked alike. The answer came back, a quick code in reverse. Zzz, zzz, zzz. This meant, Grandma Vigilante reporting. Yes, I'm here. A tall, thin form stepped from behind a lamppost. Ah, good. Ruthie was near and ready. The two were longtime partners on night patrol. By day, these grandmas, and hundreds of others, two for every block, were gray-haired ladies with slightly stooped backs or soft, comfy tummies or saggy arms or wrinkled faces. In daylight, all were grannies who doted on their grandchildren. They said, "Of course, dear," to their husbands. They baked endless batches of walnut chip molasses cookies and kept their houses in immaculate order. But at night, when their grandpa husbands were sleeping from a full day of labor for the restoration, at night when danger was most near, when naysayers or burners or breakers dared to invade the city of the king, slipping through cracks in the holy surround, then these grannies became, who would have thought it, the fierce Grandma Vigilantes. The Grandma patrols moved stealthily 2 by 2, looking like aging cat burglars, and might be laughable to some, but the enchanters' legions had learned to fear their blitz attacks and no longer took any old ladies for granted. The dark things had learned that when danger threatened grandchildren, these grannies showed no mercy. They took no prisoners. They scorned negotiations. Their canes were deadly, and their deep knee bends proved lethal to the cause of the enchanter. "So, Ruthie, what's going down tonight?" whispered Grandma Sarah, pausing in the street to pull dark gloves over her gnarled fingers. When they had finished their night disguises, the old women linked the hooks of their canes so as not to become separated in the darkness. "Oh, dearie, the worst of the worst is out tonight," muttered Grandma Ruth. "There are sleep stealers on the prowl. Those low-down, dirty crawlers, stealing beautiful dreams. They hate it when the city rests at night and lives in day life. Well, we'll fix them, won't we, Ruthie?" "We're gonna try, Sarah, sweetie." And the tall, thin granny chuckled under her breath. Despite the danger, the two were too old to be afraid. They had worked for the restoration for a long time, and they knew the secret. Those who practiced deep knee bends at night became filled with king's power. Grandma Sarah went to bend her knee, and Grandma Ruthie steadied her elbow. "Careful, dearie, remember the arthritis." The buzzer emitted 2 signals. Zzz, zzz. "We're on the vigil. Who's keeping vigil too?" Throughout the city, her signal was answered. Zzz, zzz. "We're on the vigil. Who's keeping vigil with us?" From the sound of the many echoing buzzers, it seemed that Grandma Vigilantes were out in force. Sleep stealers were abroad, and following them for sure were the naysayers. The first went creeping and stealing the good dream stories, and the second came sneaking behind, blowing bad tales into the ears of sleeping boys and girls and men and women. From somewhere down the road, 2 patrol partners heard a soft toot. They paused, still joined by their cane handles, waiting for a Mercy Street taxi corps cab to loom out of the darkness. Once, before the king had freed the people from the city of nightlife, the city taxi company had been an underground headquarters for the resistance. But after Burning Place, after New Day's Rising, the valiant company had been renamed and now dedicated itself to aiding the work of the restoration. It was Mercy Street Taxi Corps that sounded the nighttime warning whistles to waken the Grandma Vigilantes. "Hey, Bubs," growled a gruff whisper. The 2 grandmas winked at each other. Sure enough, they recognized the voice of Pete, the cabman. They could just make out the form of his taxi, parked at the curb with the motor purring. "Evening, young fella," they answered. "Yes, ma'am. Got trouble tonight. Power outs are doing no favors. Creep's been night crawling for sure. Get you a breach in the surround and get you trouble, that's for sure. You got your canes?" The grandmas nodded. "Got working batteries?" They nodded again. Suddenly, a child's cry pierced the night. The sound wrenched their hearts. Pete growled, "See what I mean? Kids screaming with bad night tales all over the city." A red light blinked on the dashboard and the cabbie shifted gears. Yep, look here. Something's cornered. Got to give some grannies a hand. The taxi started away. The tires squealed. The brake lights flashed, stopped, backed up. And Pete called, I forgot to ask. Think you ladies can handle your patrol without me for a while? They took his neglect as a compliment to their fighting skills, nodded, and shooed him along. The tires squealed, and this time the cabman did not come back. Stretching their linked canes out to full length, Grandma Sarah and Grandma Ruth began their stroll patrol. They slowly, semicircle walked down the sidewalk, the motion of the arc propelling each granny out and forward by turn. Handsome young fella, isn't he, Ruthie? A real nice boy, agreed Ruth, then whispered, You see anything? Whereas Grandma Sarah's hearing was a little lacking, her night sight was superb. No, she said in an undertone, nothing yet. You hear anything? Whereas Grandma Ruth's far sight was a little blurred, her hearing was excellent. The two stood still, one listening, one staring. They heard nothing and started the patrol again. Ah! A child's scream pierced the silent night. If I get my hands on a sleep stealer, he's going to be very sorry. Shh, sweetie. Ruth lifted her hand in a warning. What's that? Grandma Sarah stood still, straining to hear. Down on your knee, quick, down on your knee. Without argument, Sarah bent her left knee, trusting to Ruth's unerring ear. We got a signal coming from somewhere. Double signal. Zzz, zzz. Double trouble. Sound the triple. Grandma Sarah held tightly to Grandma Ruth's hand for balance. Drat these aches and pains. She pressed her knee against the ground in quick taps. 1, 2, 3. Zzz, zzz, zzz. Again. Zzz, zzz, zzz. This meant, help is near. Where are you? From down the block, but close enough, came the answering signal, one long sustained buzzer that another nearby patrol could track. Zzz. It meant, follow quickly. The two grannies hastened, because everyone knew that the danger with a long, deep knee buzzer was that anything, good or bad, could follow its signal. Grandma Sarah and Grandma Ruth linked elbows and hurried toward the emergency call. Staying together, they peered into doorways and lit strikes, the tiny flashes of fire that blazed to light alleys and cul-de-sacs where burners and breakers liked to hide. Stop, whispered Grandma Sarah. Her sharp eyes had detected motion. Something shadowy flitting around the corner of a building. This way. Use a hobble-cobble. Ruth could see nothing, but she trusted her friend's night sight. Then there was a sudden silence. The long follow quickly signal had abruptly stopped. The two grandmas hooked their canes again, spread them out to full length, and began to march. Outside legs forward and together, hobble. Inside legs forward and together, cobble. Outside legs forward and together, hobble. Inside legs forward and together, cobble. Their thick heels clunked noisily. Hobble, cobble, clunk, clunk. Hobble, hobble, clunk, clunk. Hobble, cobble, clunk, clunk. As one stretching unit, they turned the corner of the nearby building, sweeping anything shadowy before them. Sure enough, a whole circle of dark shadows was inching closer and closer to another form huddled in the courtyard of a housing complex. Dark things, and it looked like, oh my gracious, it looked like a solo granny. Halt! Who goes there? Cried Grandma Ruth. Then, without waiting for an answer, the two women chanted in one voice, In the name of the King, the Most High One, the Day Bringer, the Lord of Light, we command you to cease and desist. Here in the courtyard, in the night, their words began to call forth ranger protection, to knit together some hole that had opened in the surround. That would hold them for a few minutes. The shadows stopped advancing on the lonely granny. Grandma Ruth took several strikes from her pants pocket. She flicked them with her thumbnail. They flared. She threw them into the air. They gave off sudden light. Well, my, Sarah, sweetie, what have we got here? Grandma Sarah's sharp sight scouted the shadows. I'd say we've got a handful of burners and breakers. A patrol granny alone of all things, and a couple of naysayers for good measure. And looky here, we sure enough have got a sleep stealer climbing a drain pipe. That dirty night crawler, Meanness just shouldn't be allowed. Think we can handle this bunch, Ruthie, or should we signal for Pete? Oh, that young fellow's busy. Don't we usually end up helping him anyway? We can handle this bunch, but first, let's brace up that solo granny. She called out, Granny, Granny, don't be afraid. You're no longer alone. Remember the rule. Fear always lets dark things near. You have your handbag. The granny in the center of the courtyard stopped huddling against the wall. She clutched her bag to her ample bosom. Recalling her vigilante training, she quickly began calling out the litany of names. His Majesty, our sovereign liege lord, His Eminence, the benevolent potentate. As if to drown out her words, a counter-chant began from the shadows. Nay, 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 nay. Then louder, nay, 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 nay. Well, wouldn't you know, said Grandma Ruth, always got a pack of naysayers around if they can sniff out fear. Grandma Sarah began to unscrew her secret weapon, the handle crook from the stem of her cane. Shall we take out the sleep stealer first, before he creeps into that open window? Good idea, said Ruthie, and better be quick about it. Her sharp ears were picking up the sounds of scuffling feet somewhere in the courtyard. Grandma Sarah looped her loosened crook handle around the end of the cane stem, then held both out above her head, circling the crook, now an instant boomerang, round and round. In the head or between the shoulder blades, Ruthie? Oh, don't be nice. Give the meanie a good knock on the noggin. Grandma Ruthie flicked a quick strike for light. Grandma Sarah let fly. The cane crook went whizzing round and around, a high-pitched whine screeching as it wanged through the air. Screech! Chit, 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 chit. It clunked the sleep stealer directly on the back of the head, knocking him down the drain pipe. The pipe tore away from the wall. It teetered back and forth and back and forth. The sleep stealer kicked and scrambled with his feet in mid-air, holding on for dear life. Ah! The pipe leaned lower, 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 and then sprang back, striking the wall and shaking the intruder to the ground, where he rolled into a hump. Duck, grannies! Ruth cried as the crook boomeranged back. Sarah lifted her cane up to hook it in flight. Now, cried Ruth to the solo granny, whack 'em with your bag. Whack 'em all hard. And at this, the solo granny against the wall began wailing and flailing against the shadows. She made a break for it and joined the other two in the middle of the courtyard. Grandma Sarah shouted a stroll patrol cry. Cane war! Wumpin' and thumpin'! With that, she bent her left knee to the ground and lowered her head to monitor its steady, low signal. Better get backup just in case. The other two grandmas, linked together with the hooks of their canes, made a circle and cried back, Cane wars! Sarah stood straight and joined them in a three-way hobble-cobble. Rounding and rounding, they advanced upon the dark things. Hobble-cobble, clunk, 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 hobble-cobble, clunk, clunk, clunk. The shadows edged back, pressed hard against the wall. Trapped, the breakers lifted their cudgels and made fierce faces. The burners pointed their glowing pokers at the advancing grannies. The naysayers doubled their doom tones. Any other city folk might have been trembling, sweating, and run away. But not these three. All three shouted in one voice, Wumping and thumping! With the dark things all trapped against the wall, the grandmas proceeded to take out their canes and thrash the shadows. Whump, take that, and that, and that, and that. Whining, the dark things turned and hid their heads in their hands. It's his fault, not mine. Hit him. No, not mine. He's the one to blame. Whump him. Thump, yelled Granny Sarah. That's for making little Jed afraid of the dark. Take that, said Granny Ruth. That's for stealing the safe sleep of little Lorena. Take that and that. You all deserve a whumping. As the grannies continued to wallop their enemies' backsides, the lump that had fallen from the drain pipe stirred itself and began to shimmer on its stomach toward the combat, unseen by the battling grannies. How dare these shadowy things bring danger into Bright City? No mercy! Whump! How dare they creep through the fault lines? How dare they steal good stories from grandchildren's dreams? A cudgel flew into the air and then a poker, and the shadowy lump on the floor of the courtyard shimmied closer and closer. Unseen, it grasped a red-hot poker. Unseen, it drew itself to its knees at the back of the granny's and lifted the weapon above its head to strike a blow. "Dearie, behind you!" called Granny Sarah, ducking quickly into a deep knee bend, her head low enough to monitor the beeper's signal. Grandma Ruth turned and took her cane to the sleep stealer who was creeping up to bash her. "Ha! Gotcha!" she cried, and smashed him in the midsection with her cane. "Mercy!" he grasped, and all three grannies lifted their voices and chanted, "No mercy, wump! No prisoners, thump! No negotiations!" Wheat, honk, wheat, honk. A taxi screeched into the courtyard. It was Pete. "Grannies! Grannies!" he called. "Tin hup!" The two battling grannies paused from wumping, turned around, and lifted their canes in salute. Grandma Sarah stood to her feet. The buzzing stopped. Pete, the cabman, scrambled out. "Good work, grannies. Good battling job." He opened the back door and barked, "All right, dark things. Night's almost over. Back to the garbage dump with you." The shadows shuffled about nervously but made no move. "Or do you want me to leave you with the grannies?" Pushing and shoving, they rushed together as one into the back seat, slamming the cab door behind them. The grandma vigilantes remembered their training. Give no evil in return for evil. They tucked their canes under their arms. They hiked their pants above their waists and stood at attention. "Just in time, young fella," said Grandma Sarah. "I guess we grannies were getting a little... what do you say, frisky. We just plumb had it with sleep stealers." "Good job, grannies," said Pete. "And Solo Lady, I bet you don't hit the streets alone again. Patrol in twos or you lose." The Solo grandma mumbled something about her partner oversleeping and thinking she could handle it by herself, and with the power outs and everything she thought, but hearing her own words, she finally lowered her eyes. Pete winked at her and said, "Oh, well, everyone's got to learn sooner or later that a vigilante rule is a good rule." He slammed the door to the back seat of the taxi and double-barred the locks. "All in a good night's work, Petey," smiled Grandma Ruth. "Say, looky, girls, it's almost dawnbreak." A faint line of light streaked the sky. Morning was always the all-clear signal to night battles. The taxi squealed its tires, tooted the horn softly, and then sped away. "Yes," said Grandma Sarah. "Better get back home before Grandpa Daniel wakes up and wonders where I am." The three grannies stood in the street. They listened to the sounds of Bright City. Oh, that was good. No more child cries, no more night screams. Everyone was dreaming the best of the good story dreams, the ones that came close to morning. "I guess," said Grandma Sarah, as they took off their gloves, shook their hair out from under the discarded knit caps, and strolled toward home, "I guess I'll make a batch of walnut chip molasses cookies today." The three grannies linked elbows, and Patrol strolled with a little dance step down the middle of the empty street. Yes, indeed. Despite close calls, it had been a good night's work. "To the kingdom! To the king!" they said in parting, and each went her separate way to live out her ordinary granny life. But each was proud in her deepest heart, despite loss of sleep, despite danger and difficulties, despite today's aches and pains, to be a part of the few, the happy few, who kept vigil while the city was deep in sleep.